Hello, this is the review video for module number 2, Foundations of American Democracy. And so we're going to hit the highlights and the main points of our presentation. The first thing we want to touch on and remind ourselves of is that there are three major influences on America's primary political documents, including the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. First, we have influences from English history, such as the Magna Carta, the Glorious Revolution, and the English Bill of Rights, among others. Secondly, we have major influences from a period known as the Enlightenment, with thinkers such as Locke and Montesquieu. And third, we have a major influence on our modern government from early colonial governments. There in their documents that they had their forms of government. And so, again, three main influences: English history, the Enlightenment, and early colonial governments. Of course, during the Enlightenment, two of the major contributors to the American political tradition are going to be John Locke and Montesquieu. Locke had two primary theories that go into our political tradition and heritages. The first being his concept of natural rights, the idea that all individuals are born with certain natural rights, such as life, liberty, and property, that no government could infringe upon. He also believed in the social contract theory, in which individuals give up some of their rights in exchange for the government protecting their rights and their liberties. Montesquieu developed the idea of separation of powers, in which he proposed the government divide its power among different branches. And of course, we have three branches in our government: an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch. So two key influences on our modern government. And of course, another major influence were the original colonial governments and documents, again, brought from England. Early examples of this would have been Jamestown, which had the first legislative body in the New World, in the colonies, the House of Burgesses. The Pilgrims, who arrived in 1620 to establish the Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts, they bring with them a document government known as the Mayflower Compact, which was a form of direct democracy in which a small number of landowners could actually vote and participate in the government. Everyone had the ability to speak and propose new laws and ideas. However, you must have been a landowner and a male in order to vote. And then finally, the first Constitution in America was from Connecticut's Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Of course, Connecticut broke away from Massachusetts, bringing with them a bit of that tradition as well. Another influence was the structure of early colonial governments. By 1733, all 13 colonies had a government structure that included a constitution, an executive or a governor, and a legislative body, which were elected. And obviously you can see the correlations and the similarities and the parallels to our modern day government. As the east coast of North America is colonized, three regions of colonies developed. In the New England area, the New England colonies, they included Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. The middle colonies included New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And the southern colonies would come to include Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. A main theme we can see throughout early colonial history and the relationship between the American colonies here in North America and England is that as long as the colonies were profitable, England was very content to allow the colonies a lot of self-rule and a great deal of autonomy. We know this term to be salutary neglect. In other words, England was not going to micromanage the colonies as long as there was a favorable balance of trade and as long as the colonies were providing a lot of monetary income for England. Now, the one event that changes the outlook and management style of England over the American colonies is going to be the French and Indian War. This, of course, was a conflict around land claim disputes in the Ohio Valley. The British and American colonists will defeat the French and their Native American allies. This war begins in 1754, ends in 1763. This is the event that takes the American colonies from being highly profitable to debt. And it's this transition from profit to debt that leads to a major shift in the outlook and treatment of the colonies by England. One of the immediate effects was the passing of the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was a tax directly aimed at recovering money from the debt and having the colonies repay their own debt for this war. And of course, the major controversy over this is that the Stamp Act was passed by Parliament, who did not represent the colonists. As a result of this, we have boycotts, we have protests, we have resistance groups such as the Sons of Liberty, mainly out of Boston, who organized boycotts. They organized nonviolent protests. One good example of this is the Boston Tea Party. And of course, the phrase, the war cry, the slogan, "No taxation without representation," becomes very popular throughout the colonies there. An event that really changes things in the relationship between the colonies and Great Britain is the Boston Massacre. On March 5th, 1770, a large number of colonial protesters, large number of colonists, are going to start harassing a group of British soldiers. The British soldiers fire their weapons in self-defense, killing 5 colonists, including Crispus Attucks, who was a runaway slave and sailor at the time. Attucks is widely considered to be the first casualty, the first martyr of the American Revolution. Now, this was a simple act of self-defense by the Redcoats. However, drawings such as this one by Paul Revere will circulate all over the colonies and into Europe and make it look like the British soldiers are violently and deliberately attacking the colonists. And of course, this will be a huge propaganda tool for the colonists in this fight for their liberties and fight against the taxes and to fight against the non-representative government that they find themselves in. Massachusetts becomes the powder keg, the boiling point, the center, the target for many, many of the protests. Of course, the Sons of Liberties are here. And Massachusetts becomes the one colony that Parliament and the King really aim their new, stricter laws at. Of course, many events happen here. In addition to the Sons of Liberty being very active here, we have the Boston Massacre, we have the Boston Tea Party, and Massachusetts is eventually going to become the colony where the first shots of the Revolutionary War are actually fired. It's after the Boston Tea Party that Parliament passes the Intolerable Acts, or the Coercive Acts, as they were called. And this leads to the First Continental Congress. This was the first permanent meeting of delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies. They met. They sent a list of grievances to the king. However, the next year, we have the battles of Lexington and Concord. Of course, the Battle of Lexington spilled over to Concord. This was an attempt by a British regiment to seize a store of weapons and gunpowder being secretly held by militiamen, Minutemen. And of course, these become the first two battles of the Revolutionary War. This leads to the Second Continental Congress, as the delegates are called back together. And it's at this meeting that they take some major steps. They choose George Washington to lead the Continental Army. The Second Continental Congress, they do things such as borrow money, negotiate with foreign powers, and eventually they issue the Declaration of Independence. One thought on everyone's mind that very few individuals were willing to come out and proclaim was that many colonists wanted to sever ties with England. They wanted their independence. But it wasn't until Thomas Paine's Common Sense, a pamphlet that comes right out and says that we should declare our independence, that many colonists have something to stand on. And Thomas Paine's Common Sense is literally used as a platform for others to stand on for this battle cry that we should, in fact, sever ties with England and fight for our independence. The Second Continental Congress will task Thomas Jefferson with drafting the Declaration of Independence. The draft that is finally approved is done so on July 4th, 1776. Of course, Jefferson includes many of John Locke's ideas of natural rights and concepts of the social contract in this as well. And so, as far as America is concerned, we have declared our independence. However, there are two major questions still to be answered after this, after July 4th, 1776. Question one, when will the rest of the world, especially Great Britain, recognize us as an independent country? Question two, when will we have a true formal document government? In other words, when will we have something more substantial and more concrete than just the Second Continental Congress, who is our first acting government?